Hi, my name is Brendan *. My wife laughed at my flowers in front of everyone, so I gave them to her friend. And she gladly brought the flowers, because I thought she'd like them. Simple ones, white tulips. We were having dinner with a few of her friends. The restaurant was loud in that polished way, where the laughter feels rehearsed. I handed them to her as we sat down. She looked at them, then at me, and laughed. Said something like, "Oh wow, are these from the gas station?" Everyone chuckled. I didn't. The petals shook a little in her hand when she laughed at her friend. Anna, the quiet one, didn't laugh. She looked at me, then at the flowers. Her face softened like she was sorry to be there. Sorry it happened. I didn't think about it much. I just reached over, took the flowers back, and turned to Anna. "You take them," I said. "They'll suit you better." She hesitated, then nodded, and held them close like they were fragile. No one said a word. Something changed in the air, small but sharp. My wife tried to make another joke, but it fell flat. Someone cleared their throat. Glasses clinked. The room seemed to bright for a moment. I leaned back and listened to the fragments of conversation crawl back to life. Shame has a sound when it fills a space. It hums, low and steady. On the drive home, she didn't speak. Neither did I. The streetlights passed over her face, like slices of light and shadow. Her jaw was tight. Her hands clenched and unclenched. Finally, she asked, "What was that supposed to mean?" I watched the road. They looked better in her hands, I said. That was it. I thought about all the other times, birthdays, mornings, little things. The way small gestures die in silence. The way laughter can dull the edge of care until it feels stupid to offer it again. I wasn't angry, just aware. Indifference doesn't burn, it erodes. In the morning, the flowers were on the kitchen table. A bit drooped, but still bright. She didn't mention it. Neither did I. I made coffee, watched the steam rise, and looked at her across the room. Sometimes a gesture doesn't die. It just waits for someone who sees it. It started small. It always does. Not a fight, not a word, just the sense that I had stepped half a pace outside my own life. Watching it play without me. She laughed one night while we were watching some show. The sound surprised me. It used to pull me in. Now it felt like it came from another room. I looked at her and thought, I used to love that sound. The thought itself felt like nostalgia for a stranger. I don't remember when I stopped reaching for her hand. Maybe it was the day I realized I didn't miss it. Work became a kind of refuge. Even the meaningless parts, the hum of printers, the artificial light, the smell of burnt coffee felt cleaner than the house. My colleagues talked about deadlines, promotions, weekend plans. I listened, nodded, smiled where needed. No one noticed that my silence had a different weight. I started staying late, sometimes on purpose, sometimes just because leaving meant going back. The city outside the office changed color slowly through the glass, blue to grey to black. I liked watching that. It gave me the illusion of transition, of something moving forward. She texted less. I texted even less than that. When she did, it was practical. "What time are you home? Should I pick up milk? The sink is leaking again." Once, she sent a picture of a sunset from her office window. A kind of peace offering, maybe. I stared at it for a while, then locked my phone without replying. I don't know why. At home, things were quiet, predictable. We ate together out of habit. Sometimes she'd talk, and I'd watch her mouth form the words without listening to what they meant. She'd ask if I was tired. I'd say yes. It was easier than explaining that I was just empty. There's a kind of fatigue that isn't in the body. It lives under the ribs, waiting. One night, Anna messaged me. Nothing dramatic, just a question about a restaurant we'd gone to once as a group. I almost didn't reply. Then I did. Short answer, polite. She wrote back, a line too long to be casual. I reread it a few times. It wasn't flirtation exactly. It was attention. Warm, steady attention. The kind that doesn't ask for anything. We exchanged a few messages over the next week. Nothing inappropriate. But I noticed how I typed slower with her, choosing words carefully. How I checked for her name when my phone buzzed. I didn't feel guilt, only awareness. Like watching light move across a wall. At home, my wife asked if something was wrong. I said no. She studied my face a second longer than usual, then let it go. That was our pattern now. Small concerns dropped before they could become questions. One evening, I found an old photo of us while cleaning a drawer. We were on a trip, both sunburned, both smiling to wide. I remember the day how she'd fallen asleep in the car, her hand resting on my arm. I'd loved that silence back then, the kind that felt full. I looked at the picture for a while, then slid it back into the drawer. Not out of sadness, just recognition. Later that week, I met Anna for coffee. It wasn't planned. She happened to be nearby. That's what we told ourselves. We talked for an hour. Nothing heavy. Work, books, small things. But the ease between us felt strange. Just so much restraint. She mentioned the dinner the night with the flowers. Said she'd thought about it sometimes. I said, so have I. She smiled. But there was a trace of pity in it. Not the kind that insults you. The kind that sees too much. When we parted, she hugged me briefly. It was nothing, but the warmth stayed longer than it should have. On the walk home, I realized I hadn't thought about my wife once during that hour. The thought didn't hurt. It just sat there, calm and factual. That night, she asked how my day was. I said fine. She nodded, didn't push. Then she told me she was thinking about repainting the bedroom. I said, if you want. Her shoulders dropped slightly, like she'd expected that answer, like she'd already rehearsed her disappointment. I lay awake later, staring at the ceiling. The air between us felt too still, like a room sealed too tight. I thought about how easy it is to mistake habit for love, politeness for care. We were maintaining something, but I wasn't sure what anymore. The next morning, she left early for a meeting. I sat at the table with my coffee and her empty cup. The sunlight hit the counter in the same place it always did. The rhythm of it, all her footsteps fading. The door clicking shut was so familiar it felt scripted. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd missed her. The realization came without sadness, without relief, just truth. I went to work, went through motions, came home. The week folded into itself. One night I opened the cabinet and saw the vase, the same one she'd washed and put away. I took it out, filled it with water, set it on the table. Nothing inside it, just the water, clear and still. She noticed it later and said, "Why'd you put that out?" I said, "I don't know." She gave a small smile, unsure whether to treat it as a joke. Then she turned away. It stayed there 4 days. Sometimes I'd catch her glancing at it. I think she understood, in her own way, what it meant. We didn't talk about Anna. We didn't talk about anything deeper than dinner plans. But I felt something in her, an awareness, maybe jealousy, maybe just fear. Not of losing me, but of admitting that she already had. She tried once, late at night. We were in bed, lights off. She whispered, "Do you still love me?" It should have been a simple question. It used to be. I said, "I don't know what that means anymore." She turned away. I heard her breathing change, slow, controlled. The sound of someone trying not to cry. I didn't move, didn't reach out. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because there was nothing left to offer that wouldn't be dishonest. In the morning, she acted normal. Made breakfast, asked about my meeting. The question from last night hung in the air, invisible but solid. The day after, I saw Anna again. Just coincidence, same cafe. We talked briefly. She didn't mention the messages or my wife. But when she smiled, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Ease. Not excitement, not longing, just quiet ease. When I got home, my wife was waiting. She had cleaned the apartment, candles lit, soft music playing. A small peace gesture. I appreciated the effort, but it felt like being offered a memory. She poured wine, asked me to sit. We talked about small things, carefully avoiding everything else. I watched her face in the candlelight, still beautiful, still familiar, but I couldn't find the thread that used to connect us. After dinner, she leaned in to kiss me. I kissed her back. It felt polite. Later, as she slept, I lay awake again. The room was quiet except for her breathing. I thought about the vase on the table downstairs, the clear water catching faint light from the street. That was the crack right there, not in betrayal or anger, but in indifference that had finally become visible. A soundless split, clean, permanent. I didn't hate her. I didn't even want to leave. I just knew that whatever had once lived between us was now only a shadow we both were pretending to see. And when you finally see that truth, really see it, you stop pretending you can fix it. The next day stretched out like slow water. Nothing sharp, nothing loud. We didn't talk about the dinner. We didn't talk about the flowers. It was as if the moment had been sealed in glass and placed somewhere just out of sight, still visible if you looked closely, but easier to pretend you did in single quotes. She moved through the apartment differently now, quieter. Sometimes I'd hear her pause in the hallway, like she was listening for something. Then the sound of her slippers would continue down the tile floor, careful and even. I started waking earlier than usual. I'd make coffee before she got up, not out of consideration, just habit. The smell filled the kitchen, sharp and familiar. I liked those few minutes alone, the light just starting to come in, the city outside still half asleep, the sound of the refrigerator, the hum of traffic in the distance. Small, ordinary things. She'd appear eventually, wrapped in her robe, hair tied back roughly. She looked softer in the mornings, vulnerable, in a way she probably didn't want to be seen. But even then, there was something guarded about her movements, like she was measuring the distance between us, step by step. Morning, she'd say. Morning, I'd answer. That was it. The flowers had lasted about a week. The tulips bent gradually toward the window, their stems losing strength, petals curling slightly at the edges. On the 6th day, one of them dropped onto the counter, pale and thin like paper. The next morning, they were gone. I hadn't seen her throw them out, but I heard the faint crinkle of the trash bag early that morning. When I came into the kitchen, the vase was still there, filled with clean water. Empty. It looked strange, that empty vase, like a glass of waiting. I left it there 4 days, maybe just to see how long she'd let it sit. In the evenings, she came home later and later. She said work was busy, new projects, deadlines, meetings. I didn't ask questions. I didn't doubt her either. I just didn't care enough to check which was true. Sometimes, when she came in, she'd pause at the door before taking off her shoes, as if bracing herself. Then she'd sigh, walk in, and start talking before I said anything. She filled the air with stories from her office, the people there, small irritations. I listened, nodded. She never noticed how often I didn't reply. It was strange the way she kept performing normalcy, making dinner, asking about my day, mentioning some show she thought we could watch together. I knew she was trying, in her own way, trying to erase that one evening without actually naming it. But something about her effort made it worse. The carefulness, the deliberate normal tone. It was like someone trying to clean a stain without looking at it. I spent more time out of the apartment, stayed longer at work, walked home slowly, taking detours through quieter streets. The city felt bigger when I walked without destination. Sometimes I'd stop by a small bakery, get something simple, eat it on the way back, just to delay returning. There's a point when silence stops being peace and becomes habit. I think we reached that point around the 2nd week. We still shared a bed, but even that changed. We used to sleep tangled, legs brushing, her head on my shoulder. Now there was space between us, not big, maybe a hand's width, but it felt like a wall. I'd wake sometimes in the dark and listen to her breathing, steady and slow. She used to curl toward me in her sleep. Now she stayed facing the other way. One night, I dreamed of the flowers, the same tulips, but fresher, taller. They were standing in the same vase, except this time, the water was black. I woke up before dawn. The dream didn't mean anything. I just remembered it too clearly. The next morning, she mentioned that Annie, the friend I'd given the flowers to, had texted her. Something casual, about meeting for lunch. She said it lightly, but there was a pause after. I didn't react. She said the tulips lasted longer than she expected. My wife said, pouring coffee. I nodded. Good for her. That was all. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was trying to see if there was anger left in me, or something else. I met her gaze and didn't look away. After a moment, she blinked first, The day went on like any other, but something had shifted again, small, almost invisible. That evening, she was quieter than usual. She cooked, cleaned, scrolled on her phone. The apartment felt too bright under the kitchen light. Before bed, she stood by the sink and washed the empty vase. Carefully, like it was fragile. I watched her dry it with a towel, then place it upside down in the cabinet. A small, final gesture. I think that's when I understood that the moment with the flowers had become something larger, not a fight, not even a wound, just a quiet border we'd crossed without knowing. We were polite now. We said thank you. We said good night. We smiled occasionally, but every word felt rehearsed, every movement slightly delayed, like actors who'd forgotten their lines, but kept the scene going anyway. I started noticing other silences. At dinner, in the elevator, when friends invited us out and we said no, without agreeing beforehand. The shared refusal, unspoken, automatic. Sometimes she would reach out a hand on my arm, a light touch when passing behind me in the kitchen. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. The contact felt like memory, not warmth. And still, I didn't hate her. I didn't even resent her. The emotion had drained out of things, leaving only the outline of what used to be love. One Sunday, I cleaned the apartment while she slept in. I found one of the tulip petals stuck behind the coffee maker, dried, thin, almost transparent. I held it between my fingers, and for a second, the smell of that restaurant came back. The laughter, the look on Anna's face, the sound of her voice when she said thank you. I let the petal fall into the trash. It made no sound at all. By evening, she was in a better mood. She played music while cooking, something light. She poured wine for both of us. I joined her at the table, and for a brief moment, it almost felt easy again. She looked at me across the table and smiled. "You're quiet tonight," I said. "I've been quiet for a while." She laughed softly, like she didn't know if it was a joke. When we finished dinner, she reached for my hand. I let her hold it. Her fingers were warm, a little shaky. I think she was waiting for something for me to say it was okay, for me to bridge the gap. I didn't, not out of cruelty, just honesty. Later, as we got ready for bed, she stood at the mirror brushing her hair. Her reflection met mine. For the first time, she didn't look away. "Do you think we're okay?" she asked quietly. The question hung there. I thought about how to answer. Then I said, "We're steady." She nodded slowly. "That's not the same thing." "No," I said. "It's not." We turned off the lights. In the dark, I listened to her breathing again, slow and even. It should have been comforting. Instead, it just sounded like distance measured in seconds. That night I didn't dream at all. She moved around the kitchen quietly, opening drawers, running the tap too long. The kind of silence that isn't peace but truce. Her eyes brushed past me once, then again, like she couldn't decide if she was still angry or just embarrassed. The tulips stood between us, slightly bent, their stems leaning toward the light. She poured herself coffee, didn't ask if I wanted any. I didn't mind. I watched her fingers on the cup, the chipped nail polish. Small details always told more truth than words. I used to notice them because I cared. Now I noticed them because I didn't. The flowers looked tired, but they still held something soft, like they'd understood what happened better than either of us did. She finally said, "That was cruel." I didn't answer. Cruelty needs intention. I just stopped pretending not to see what was there. Her voice wavered a little. "You embarrass me." I nodded. "You laughed first." It hung there, quiet but solid. She turned away. I could almost see the thought cross her mind whether to apologize or double down. She chose neither. We finished breakfast in silence. The sound of the spoon against the cup felt too loud. Before she left for work, she straightened the flowers, trimmed the stems, replaced the water. Small act, almost invisible. As I noticed, when the door closed behind her, I sat down at the table. The tulips leaned again, soft and forgiving. I touched one petal. It felt cold, but alive. Sometimes a moment doesn't end where it happens. It stretches, folds itself into the quiet hours after. You start to see what was always there, just sharper. I didn't know if she'd bring up the dinner again. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, something had shifted, not broken, not fixed, just rearranged. And for the first time in a while, that felt honest. Hi, my name is Brendan *. My wife laughed at my flowers in front of everyone, so I gave them to her friend. And she gladly brought the flowers, because I thought she'd like them. Simple ones, white tulips. We were having dinner with a few of her friends. The restaurant was loud in that polished way, where the laughter feels rehearsed. I handed them to her as we sat down. She looked at them, then at me, and laughed. Said something like, "Oh wow, are these from the gas station?" Everyone chuckled. I didn't. The petals shook a little in her hand when she laughed. Her friend, Anna, the quiet one, didn't laugh. She looked at me, then at the flowers. Her face softened, like she was sorry to be there. Sorry it happened. I didn't think about it much. I just reached over, took the flowers back, and turned to Anna. "You take them," I said. "They'll suit you better." She hesitated, then nodded, and held them close like they were fragile. No one said a word. Something changed in the air, small but sharp. My wife tried to make another joke, but it fell flat. Someone cleared their throat. Glasses clinked. The room seemed to bright for a moment. I leaned back and listened to the fragments of conversation crawl back to life. Shame has a sound when it fills a space. It hums, low and steady. On the drive home, she didn't speak. Neither did I. The streetlights passed over her face, like slices of light and shadow. Her jaw was tight. Her hands clenched and unclenched. Finally, she asked, "What was that supposed to mean?" I watched the road. "They looked better in her hands," I said. That was it. I thought about all the other times, birthdays, mornings, little things. The way small gestures die in silence. The way laughter can dull the edge of care until it feels stupid to offer it again. I wasn't angry, just aware. Indifference doesn't burn, it erodes. In the morning, the flowers were on the kitchen table. A bit drooped, but still bright. She didn't mention it. Neither did I. I made coffee, watched the steam rise, and looked at her across the room. Sometimes a gesture doesn't die. It just waits for someone who sees it.